episode 899. I know I've done this for a while.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. I actually had a friend of mine. I have a coffee with once a month. She goes to me, I don't have 900 anything. Holy shit. Right?
Man,
Yeah.
I got to give you to you for stick with itness.
Well, it's fun. Like, okay, I mean, okay, just think about this, okay? I don't know you very well yet. We'll get into that as we go. But I've talked to people that have just done incredible. I had Susie yesterday with a pop singer I interviewed when she was 15 years old. She just had come back from Dubai, her and her mom. So I mean, I get to be around amazing people like this all the time. Why wouldn't you stick with something like this?
Hey, I was a radio guy, so you can tell me that. I can tell you that much, and I enjoyed that part of it too. Meeting
Yeah,
everybody in the biz.
yeah. It's not just everybody in the business. I mean, I think something like this is a reminder that we all have a tendency to look at the world when we look at what's presented to us. It's this horrible, mean, and nasty place, and it does have elements of it for
Yeah,
sure. But there's wonderful people everywhere if you're willing to go out and look for them. So, and this show is a constant reminder because who I interview people going for really cool stuff all the time. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't you want to stick with something like that? If it's that good,
that's cool. But 900 episodes, just about. That's pretty amazing. Congratulations.
well, thank you. Well, so how long were you in radio?
Do I want to get into that? Oh, I don't know. That really ages me. More than 30 years.
It's okay. Honestly, you don't look it. You look great. So there you go.
You get points for that right off the bat.
Yeah. Well, yeah. See, hey, listen. You gotta build up your. Yeah, that's the other thing too. You get to build up great people, right? So you gotta build them up because it brings up the best parts of them. But I mean, seriously, it sounds like you yourself had a wonderful time when you did it.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was a job like any other job at times, but I got to meet a lot of great people,
Mhm.
famous or not famous. I get to spend my mornings helping people start their day because I was a morning guy for most of that for more than 25 years, I guess, altogether out of my career. And yeah, help them start the day off right, hopefully. And if you've done that, you've done your job.
Yeah.
And you meet a lot of good people, as you say. Every now and again, maybe somebody could be a little bit strange. You have to be careful of, but mostly really good people.
Well, you'll say strange. I'll say asshole. Sometimes you get that too, right? But
Diplomatic. I'm being diplomatic.
no, it's okay. You don't have to be. Listen, the diplomatic part is no names need to be mentioned. That's the rule, right? That's diplomatic. You can call it like you see it, though. I mean, I'd say 95% of the people you meet are completely wonderful. 5% fall into some of them are just having a bad day. It happens, right? And some of them are just dicks, right? And you learn, right? And then you realize if they're assholes, what you realize is okay, I'm not gonna let this time. I mean, at first you get what the fuck is this, but eventually you get to the point where you evolve and mature or some kind of BS like that. And you realize I'm only here for a certain amount of time. I can let this be ruin my day, or I can let this just be part of the job.
Roll off your shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You take the good and the bad and try to look at the good and remember the good and not remember the bad. It doesn't always work that way, but yeah, mostly pretty good.
yeah. I mean, bad has to work a lot harder to stick with you than good. I find like it's weird because if you look at it from listenership, people seem to be drawn to bad stuff all the time when you look at like television and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
that's
the
true.
stuff that really sticks with people is the good stuff, right? That's what I've noticed, and it's like that is, I think, a wonderful like aspect of it. So I mean, I don't necessarily want this show to be like a Hallmark movie. That's not a flavor of ice cream I want to be a part of. But I understand the appeal of the Hallmark movie because again, it's that feeling good thing. Right? I think at the end of the day, I think we all want to feel good.
Yeah, and we don't want to have to think too hard, work too hard. You would like to be stimulated, but you don't want to be overburdened, and you don't need
Exactly.
other people's worries to add on top of your own.
Well,
So
that's why I actually got to stop watching the news. I realize no, because I realized at a very young age that although yeah, being informed is important, but there are, especially in today's world, there are other ways of being informed now. So you don't necessarily have to go and listen to a crafted advertisement campaign disguised as news. That's kind of what the news has become. Um, I could do a back in my day thing because I'm sure there was always a narrative somewhere, somehow, some way, but it has refined to such a point that I just realized that they're trying to make me think a certain way, and
Yeah.
I'm too old for that shit. I'm just too old for that shit. So just like, um, I'll go get informed on my own, and if I make mistakes along the way, so be it. But I like having my own thoughts in my own headspace, and you know what? I'm happier for it. I'm wrong sometimes, but I'm happier for it.
Well, it's like you say, though, people are attracted to the bad. So the news people know that. So they work on fear. They work on the whole thing. If it bleeds, it leads. And I used to be in news for a few years in the radio business. I didn't work on that basis because we're a local radio station, and our greater focus was what was of interest to local people.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to draw a national audience or whatever. So if it was something local, it could be anything, small, big, didn't matter. And that was a nicer focus. I never really worked in a huge market and didn't feel that competition to try to, shock people or anything like that. And on the radio, I was never a shock jock by any means. I just tried to give people a nice, entertaining, informative kind of start to the day, and that was good. But as you know, and I'm sure in the show notes it'll say I'm an author, and the first book I wrote was about the radio industry, fictionalized, but it was also about the vulnerability of media people. Because, as you were saying, most people are wonderful. Most of our listeners were wonderful, but it just took one crazy who could maybe endanger you or your family. I didn't have that happen to me directly myself, but I did know others who had their kids kind of stalked and threatening stuff that way. So
Well, okay, so that's the flip side. The flip side of it too is there's okay, smaller networks. I'm sure you had a little bit of in their local area that people knew who you were, what you did, right? But you were more in a community based, and I'll say it like that, community based radio, which was okay. Yes, you're covering news, you're informing people, but your primary focus is, hey, this is a cool community. This is what's going on
yeah,
today, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually, I think, a really nice way of doing things.
yeah,
But so the good news with that is there's a relative anonymity that comes with it. Again, some people know who you are, but by and large, you're left to your own devices, which is a wonderful thing. You go on, okay, so you watch, okay, let's use I think the most popular network you have in the States is Fox. Okay. Which I think is the most popular one. I could be wrong, but I think it is. Um, so I watch some of the Fox Sports stuff. Some of these guys get all kinds of television time. They get focused, and people feel like they know these people. That's fame, and fame, right, comes with a very heavy price tag in any industry. Right, fame, as far as I can tell, only has one purpose, and that is it makes you more money. Right.
yeah. Some people are, how do you call it? They're attention grabbers. They're greedy, hungry for it.
Yeah.
So it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about the fame. It's being made to feel important because you're known, because somebody recognized your name or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was always feeling like a medium-sized frog in a small pond.
Yeah.
And because I was always in medium markets, that's where I wanted to live. It really didn't have that much to do with career. I just didn't want to live in a bigger city.
No, that's fair.
Yeah. So, you would get to know people, and they might recognize my voice when they heard me a couple aisles away in the store because it was a radio guy. But uh, I didn't have that intrusive part of the audience. They didn't come up to me and bug me or anything like that. So I didn't have that negative side. I also didn't look for it. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was off the air, I didn't call attention to myself. I was a fairly private person other than that. I would go out and do public appearances till, the sheep come home if it was required and help somebody. But I didn't go out and seek attention. There are some people, and we can all think of TV stars that come off the top of your head that just seem to love the attention. They're attention whores. What can you say?
Okay, so two minds. Like especially when you look at celebrities on television, I'm of two minds on that one
Hmm.
because they're in a weird space. Because okay, so people that just seek fame for the sake of seeking fame, this is just my professional opinion, are dumbasses. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, right. That's this is my opinion because fame comes with so. Okay, so I don't know. Have you ever? I I went to there's a comic convention up here in Edmonton, Alberta. Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, Star Wars.
Yeah.
Everybody could tell where she was in the building. You want to know why? Because she was surrounded by security, and on top of that, she had people following her all the time. I watched this for a couple days because she's like everybody else. At the end of the day, she just wants to see the con, have some fun,
Yeah.
but she can't do
Absolutely.
it. But she can't do it like a normal person. She
No.
can't. She can't even and I realized wow, you can't even get a corner to yourself to have a private meal. And but somebody going up to you and going, "Oh my God, this is so and so and so," right? Oh, I could tell it probably drove her nuts. But I mean, but again, she couldn't help it. Like Star Wars became this giant juggernaut. Like no one can plan for that kind of thing.
No.
So
If
right,
if you're going into that business, you kind of have to realize that the price of big fame is going
yeah,
to be that. Anybody could tell you that, and they probably know it. It's not the same thing as really feeling it and experiencing it. And
yeah.
so as I say, I never saw that kind of attention and wouldn't have wanted that.
No,
It,
no,
it's
most sane people don't want that kind of attention. Right. Most sane people
totally
don't.
right.
But if you're in that, so this is the other side of it. So this is the nuanced side. When you see like these attention whore grabbing actors, moguls, whatever, it's so we're not gonna. I don't want to necessarily dwell into the politics of this man, but something I've noticed about Trump when he's on TV, he always generates a reaction to everybody that comes up, whether you like him or you hate him. He gets a reaction. He gets this visceral reaction. And what I realized, again, this is something I just realized about him. In one sense, he's a genius. This is where I will give him his due. He knows how to manipulate the media and in turn people's feelings about him, which in turn keeps him on the air, makes his companies viable, makes everything he does more profitable because every time he's on television, it's a commercial for him and everything he does.
Well, this is the thing, though. I mean, you're saying you don't want to get into the politics. I don't think he really is at root about politics. I don't
No,
think his politics are the point. The point is just drawing attention to himself.
exactly. No, no.
Never
Like,
will get attention for him.
well, Howard Stern figured this out in the 90s. Like when he was doing the shock jock thing, it wasn't the people that liked him that actually were making his show money. It was the people that hated him. They did the breakdowns. They did the breakdowns, and people that liked the show would listen to him about 30 to 45 minutes. The people that hated him would listen to him for an hour and a half. Right, and this was his number breakdown, and he realized that the and I've seen this on Facebook posts and other things. The people that talk about Trump the most are the people that hate him. Psychology is still there to this day.
That's
So
probably true. Yeah, I can see that. Well, and he can't stand when he's not getting attention.
oh
When
sure,
he doesn't
no,
get that attention, he can't stand it. So if it's anything bad that he thinks is unfair, he'll draw attention to it with other people that try to hope, but hope that it just slide away and people would forget about it. He can't do that.
no, and but again, I think part of that, I think some of that is he's a legit narcissist, but some of that is he's gaming the system. some of
Mhm.
that is gaming the system. And I can kind of see it. Like, it's not just like anybody you want to go with. Like you look at someone that goes says outrageous shit like Kanye West, or someone that goes out there. I'm looking at what they're doing, and I'm just realizing it's the nature of how television is today, right? They're looking to get any kind of reaction, and I think to some degree, every celebrity feeds off that to some degree. Now, I do think, much like anything else, like the show here is me as much as it is like my guess. It's me. So what I'm doing here, it will carry wherever it carries. So, and I say it like that because that there's got to be a certain degree of authenticity to it. So, do I think that Kanye West is authenticity crazy? Yes. Do I think that Donald Trump's authenticity a little bit authentically a narcissist? Absolutely. But I also think there's also a little bit of that mix of, okay, I'm gaming this system too, because I see how the game is played. And I
Oh,
and I definitely believe that.
yeah, I mean, they have to play that game.
Yeah.
Anybody who rises to that kind of level in the entertainment world, and
Mhm.
nowadays the lines of where the entertainment world stops and other areas
Mhm.
begin is really blurred, especially when it comes to politics. And they've learned that exactly. So where they don't have these real fiery, stormy relationships probably half the time. They probably live boring lives, but
Yeah.
they can't let that go. So they create some kind of thing that people are going to grab onto and think, ooh, this is the next salacious bit of gossip in the tabloids. And I'm going to read that because they've got to constantly feed that machine. That's what the tabloids look for because it's what the tabloid readers want, or television that's comparable to it. And then they have to feed that machine with the stories. They don't have to be true. They don't have to be true at all, but they do have to grab attention, and everybody's getting good at that. It makes it really hard to believe what you see on any of the media, you know?
Well, that's why I don't like, because it's just like I just don't like. I've come to that realization. Like, this is a giant. I just woke up one day and I realized this is a giant ass commercial, right? And if I'm going to pick a commercial to live in, I'm going to try to go for the beer commercial first and foremost. I mean, if I'm going to live in the fantasy world, let's go. But I mean, the again, I think the nature of where things have gone is there's nothing real there anymore. And if you're looking for something of substance, ironically, it is the radio where you'll find some of that, right? Right? Not big stuff, but I mean, I think small and smaller places, because again, you're listening, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot less bells and whistles when it's just a voice.
Now the drawback is with the radio business, and I don't like to hear people talking about the way it was back when in the golden age and used to
Back
be
in my
good.
day. Yeah.
But things were different.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
nowadays, there's an awful lot more syndication, even at every level of market you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Fewer and fewer people who are actually working in that market and looking for the local things to talk about. So there's a lot more of that. There's more automation where somebody in one market can record shows for 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know how many, because I didn't end up doing it as a morning man. But there were other people doing other day parts in the day that would record for maybe several other markets than the one that they actually were living and working in. So that kind of thing dilutes it a lot. And it's just the way the radio business has gone, as other entertainments go. They are a business. You say the radio business, it's a business.
Yes.
It's like the writing business, the publishing business, it's a business. And you have
Yeah.
to approach them that way. You have to recognize that's the way it is.
Yeah, well, actually, that's funny because I mean, we're looking at potential alterations of the business going forward. I'm assuming you are aware of AI art going on right now, like everybody else is.
The witch.
Artificial intelligence art.
Oh, yeah.
Did you, yeah.
Yeah, and writing too, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the AI art to me it actually reminds me of Napster. So what the AR does basically is it takes different art, like copyrighted art, and puts together a new piece. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so I when I'm looking at this, when I'm looking at the art being generated, it's like this is touching all the copyright stuff all over again. So I think, and this is how I see this going, early next year, they are being sued for this. Someone somewhere is going to go, it's going to go to court, and it's going to temporarily put this to a halt, and then they'll figure out a way again to do what Spotify's done, what Amazon's done, right? For illustrators. That's what I think this is ultimately leading to. And maybe I'm just how do I put this? Maybe I'm being an optimist, maybe I'm being cynical, but I just, like, it's like, I've seen you before. I know what you are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen some examples of some programs and in art that artist friends have used, and they've come up with some illustrations that you kind of go, "Wow, that is amazing! That's just amazing stuff." Mind you, it looks very derivative. It looks
Yeah.
like other things you've seen all the time. I don't know whether it's capable of doing anything that isn't like that. As you say, it's probably taking all these different styles
Yeah.
and incorporating them from other people
Yeah.
and coming up with something wholly original. Now, mind you, that's hard for humans to do too, but we do it. AI, I don't know whether it's capable of doing that or not. Mind you, I
It
haven't worked with the art, and I haven't really gone out of my way to read any of the writing either, particularly. I mean, except for the obvious things where they write sports reports by AI and stuff like that. Of course, I've seen that, but I haven't seen much in the way of fiction or quasi-fictional writing with AI assists.
No, I mean, AI is going to definitely hit the writing industry in some form or fashion as well, and that's
It
just
is,
reality, right? It's already started. But I mean,
yeah.
but and I look at it kind of like, so I look at it kind of like this. Well, in one hand, I'm like, it doesn't really matter. On the other hand, because art, the thing is, it's not. I mean, again, we're talking about the business of art, the business of, well, there's got to be a model of profit somewhere, and somewhere, somehow, some way, that's going to be figured out. And once that's figured out, I think ultimately the fact that publishing has decentralized so much anyway, right? I think I don't know if I decide to publish books next year, which I'm going to do, right? I don't know if that really impacts my day to day. I mean, if I'm just building my own brand, doing my own thing, pardon me, if I'm doing my own brand, doing my own thing, I'm not sure this really touches me whatsoever, right? And my goal isn't necessarily the big five or big four or big whatever that amalgam is called right off the top of my head. Again, I'm not sure this really matters the way people think it does. Maybe I'm crazy.
Well, hard to say. I mean, it all comes down to, because you're talking about a profit having to be made, or let's put it more baldly, a living
Yeah.
that might have to be made. It is competition. We've got lots and lots of competition from each other. Now, I mean, people you don't know from other human writers. When you add AI into the mix, then you've got just that much more competition. Presumably, it is good, or it will be good at some point, or good enough. There's another case where good enough,
Yeah.
is problematic. But it ends up being a case where it's competition, and how do you, as a writer, stand out from the crowd now if you end up with more competition in the way of churning these automated programs or AIs churning out more and more and more content? How does anybody rise above that? You're like a drop in the ocean at that point. And I know that you could say, well, we can do what we're doing here. We can talk about things, show our human face, and attract people that way to what we do. Yes, that's possibly true. Well, one thing that I think about, and I thought about as you were talking, was in the days and centuries gone by, and maybe millennia gone by, artists often had sponsors. Essentially, they
Yeah.
had patrons, and now, of course, we got Patreon. But that is a long, long history, a long heritage where artists didn't fit into the mercantile whole system or anything of commerce, business, making a profit. They didn't have to. They really couldn't. So they had to have patrons and supporters that way. It hasn't changed. It's just the model of how the patronage works is changing, where you have Patreon instead of, one rich guy, who's paying your bills.
Well, I'm trying to get multiple rich people I know to pay my bills. That's kind of the
Yeah.
goal,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, it's true. It's nature. Going to the business end of things here. I'm a freelancer. I'm doing podcast. I'm creating content for clients, right? I like video content, audio content, much like this, because I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I have a big mouth and I'm good at it, right? So it's one of those things where I can use it to help other people, and I figured this out. And again, like any good, I think the difference between what an artist has to be then versus now. Then you found somebody, they took care of you, but you still were doing work for them, even if it was painting a picture of my family, or do this or do that or do the other thing. You're still doing work for somebody. So it's I think the evolution of, okay, what writing a book and putting together a book is today compared to what it was early has forced, I think, creative people to develop business skills.
Certainly selling it. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. I mean, you're not putting it in the hands of other people nowadays. We have to kind of do that ourselves, as you well know, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I think maybe an advantage that we have over AI, for instance, is that we can explore important things in a creative and deeper way. I like to believe that we could, find more insight into the human condition and write something important. I mean, when I'm writing science fiction, I'm a science fiction writer. And when I'm writing it, I try to come at it with issues, important themes that I want to explore. And I try to do it in a deep, creative, some people would, say literary way. I'm not trying to be, buy into that snobbish aspect of that.
So you don't like being accused of writing literature?
I just mean deep. I just
Yes.
mean
Yeah.
probing, having believable looking characters who are doing real things, exploring real issues, real elements of the human condition and human experience. And I don't know whether AI will be able to do that. They may be able to simulate it, and we'll have to see. But I kind of tend to think they might be able to do the plot driven one darn thing after another kind of story before they get into something that is more deep and meaningful and actually has some truth in it.
So what era of science fiction did you grow up loving?
What sign?
No, what era of science fiction did you grow
Oh,
up loving?
era of science fiction. Sorry. Well, I grew up during the 60s and 70s were my formative years. I always loved writing, always loved reading science fiction and watching Star Trek on TV and others. But my father was a big science fiction fan, and we would have long discussions about some of the deeper stuff, whether it was Ray Bradbury or some of the, um, Philip K. Dick stuff. It didn't really matter. But after dinner, we would have these long discussions about all these different things. I was a fan of Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov and John Wyndham, for that matter. So that probably places my formative era. And then later on, of course, it's gotten to a lot of other writers. I know you've talked to Robert J. Sawyer, who is just a hugely successful Canadian writer and a great guy. I love his work, so I read most of that, if not all of it. I don't try to write like him or anybody else, but I do take lessons from what they do. For instance, Rob will tell you should have an issue, you should have a theme. Science fiction should be about something, damn it. It shouldn't just be a plot, but look at the human condition now in a story that may take place centuries from now, or in Rob's case and in my case, usually not that far ahead.
So, okay. So lots to unpack. So of all the guys you mentioned, the one guy I could not get into was Clark.
Yeah.
I tried. I think he had some great concepts, but it just for whatever reason, I just couldn't stick the landing. Like I love Asimov. I loved Asimov growing up, and I love Bradbury. And Dick is interesting. He's sometimes a little too clever for his own good, but I love his he understood, I think, more than anybody else I've ever read, the ability to play with expectations. He does such a wonderful job of that. And Rob Sawyer is an excellent author, like modern author, in the
Yeah.
science fiction realm.
Well, Clark, I mean, was good with the ideas and the hard science of the day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Different things. He was not great at character creation. You know, his
Yeah.
people were pretty flat and kind of cardboard.
Yeah, whereas like, again, so I appreciated his ideas. I'm not like I'll be like, I appreciate his ideas. I just thought Asimov did it better. That's just my opinion, because Asimov had some especially early Asimov was he had some flat characters, but the thing Asimov was able to do so fundamentally well was he would take a very complex concept and he would break it down incredibly simply. I really loved his approach to that. You could get a whole complex scientific concept inside of the page, and it would not detract from the story he was telling either. Right. Yeah. So, right. And he was so good at that. One of my favorite books of his is called The Edge of Tomorrow. It was a half short story collection, half essays, his actual essays. His essays are incredible.
Yeah, I got that one. I haven't read it in a long time.
So my favorites, the two in there I really love are the Billard Ball. Right? The Billard Ball is one of my all-time favorite sci-fi short stories ever. I love the ending. It's very ambiguous in the right way. And the second one is it's the essay Euclid's Fifth. It's Mathematical Law of Euclid. I still remember it all the way to this day. So I mean, he's a great writer, like just unbelievable.
I'm going to have to look back at him. Ray Bradbury was a brilliant writer. You almost hesitate not to call him science fiction, because what he did was not always what I would consider science fiction, but it was offbeat, it was strange, it was weird, and he did it brilliantly, absolutely brilliant.
So do you want to hear one of my releases next year? You're gonna dig this. I actually am doing a retelling of Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, yeah.
Love that. That book was the only book to ever scare me. It's the only book that's ever done it. I've read some stuff like the horror. I've gone all over the place, but that book is the one that actually was like, holy shit! It scared me.
There it is. It's an issue where he saw something in the present day, he extrapolated it out into the future and said, what could it be at its extreme? Similar things with Brave New World or Handmaid's Tale, or, those kinds of books. My latest one is called Augment Nation, and I consider it in that category. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a classic as they are particularly. It's just in that cautionary vein where I see a trend in technology and it's going to go very, very soon. And it's brain augmentation by computer. So you have a computer device with you all the time, maybe implanted in your skull as the main character has, or maybe attached as a consumer item. And you got that technology with instant thought access, including straight to the internet. But that is a stream that flows both ways. So,
absolutely.
A lot of potential for evil there as well as good. And that's why it's the cautionary kind of thing, like Fahrenheit 451. You see trends and you go, this could be going in this direction. Think about it now, because we've got to make decisions now for how you want this technology or this trend in society to go.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, I think one of the big things about today in comparison, I think, than 2 years ago, I think there's a lot more. There's a weird, how to put this. There's a lot of people that believe they're powerless to make a decision to change the world today. Right. I think 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, there was a lot more belief in a person being able to change the world, right, than there is today. Ironically, I think this is the thing. This is the flip side. Where are you, by the way? Like, you mind my asking? Like, what city you're in?
Well, right now I'm in kind of the middle of Ontario, in a small town, visiting.
Whereabouts?
I'm just in the Haliburton area at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'm from Ontario initially.
Oh yeah, cottage country right now.
Not yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Ontario. Okay, so so on the one hand, you have the how do I put this? Again, that feeling I think it feels more. But on the other hand, okay, you and I are literally about 2, 3. I'm in Calgary, Alberta. You are
Yeah.
2, 3,000 kilometers away from each other. Okay, we're having a conversation about freaking science fiction, right? I think we generally like at least some of the same stuff reading wise,
Hmm.
generally, right? Right. So that's a cool thing. And that's an impact, a ability to make connections, change forms, thought, all that stuff, right? So when you see it like that, it's like we have on the one hand, I think we the who am I on one voice against the voice of billions. But on the other hand, I think it's just more true to the reality is we have an ability now more than ever to have these like conversations and really think about how we want to take the world and where we want to take the world and why um and I think the wonderful evolution that's kind of happening right now is we have the ability down to diverge in a myriad of different ways too, which I think is really freaking cool. Right? I think decentralization is actually a good thing overall. It fragments some things, but also it gives people that possibility to explore their own corners in the universe. And I think that's a wonderful idea. Um, right? How we get there, that's the magical question. When we talk about brain augmentation, I think of ironically a biblical story, the Tower of Babel.
Mm.
That's what I actually think of when I think of stuff like technology like that, worlds like that is the whole idea of the tower is basically we go so high to talk to heaven. We're all united as one in this purpose or whatever. And then somewhere along the way it just fractures and goes into a zillion directions. I almost kind of feel that's where we're at. We're kind of building this weird Tower of Babel, but I think it's more like a light switch now. Instead of like a physical tower, it's like we're all connected to this technology and this uh, possible way of being. And I think eventually, much like the tower before it, it'll fracture.
Well, yeah, I guess there's the potential for both. I mean, certainly with the internet, it can bring people together, and you can get a lot more power by coming together. I think of some of the various social action networks that I get emails from all the time, and contribute to petitions, or you contribute money to help their cause, and it could be about biodiversity, or it could be about climate change, or it could be
Mhm.
social justice, and they do get things done because they have these large voices that they can gather together. Cumulatively, we can have a large voice to talk to these politicians or these people meeting at conferences, conventions, climate conferences, or the biodiversity conferences and things like that, and actually get some things done. So you've got, well, that whole thing where we might be sitting in separate places, very individual, nobody else around, but we're connected electronically, and we can actually draw up some pretty good power when we work together like that. So it is
Yeah.
an interesting time when it comes to that kind of technology and how it's used.
Yeah. I kind of feel like we're in a potential new renaissance, which I think is a really cool concept. So, and I think it's funny because we're talking science fiction, like publishing wise. I think this is my opinion. I think there's some great science fiction books. But I think of all the genres, science fiction feels the most behind in times in terms of presentation.
Really?
Yeah, because again, I'm just speaking with the authors I am dealing with by and large. I look okay. If I go to an Indigo chapters in Canada, and I go to the science fiction section, it's still a couple shelves, but it's only a couple shelves. I go to the fantasy section, and it's like, wee, look how much fantasy there is, right? And by the way, I think fantasy's freaking cool. I'm not here to knock fantasy at all, but it reminds me, and when you look at the science fiction selves, a lot of the stuff is the classical. They have new stuff there, but it's a lot of classical stuff. And I realized something very, very interesting when I look at If I want to look at cutting edge books, ironically enough, there's two sections: the young adult.
Whoa, I lost you. Hello, Josh. Lost your connection there. Josh, are you there? Can you join us again? Well, I mean, I don't know. We seem to have lost Josh. We can't have just Joshing without Josh.
Got knocked out there somehow.
Well, yeah.
Right before I get to my big point. So, all right, I'm back.
Yes, you got.
Okay, I'm back. Technology, it's a wonderful thing. Hopefully you were entertaining while I was gone.
I was just wondering where you were. I said we can't have just Josh and without Josh, it doesn't work.
Actually, I have a an episode where my computer it just I couldn't get back in, and so she had to take over for like 40 minutes. It did that. It has happened.
Well, I was just staring into space here, so I wasn't probably looking at anything. I was trying to see whether you're linking back up or whether you're trying to
Oh
reach
yeah,
me.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was about to contact you. Say, I'll be back. Just give me a second. Just give it a second. I'll be there. I swear.
Yeah, we're
But
here.
okay,
Yeah.
so what I was saying before I got knocked out of orbit there was the most cutting edge publishing stuff I see is ironically the young adult. Young adult tries stuff all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And romance of all things.
Hmm?
They're the most cutting edge publishing. And I feel like science fiction, ironically, right,
Well,
is
I wouldn't argue that there may be not a lot of science fiction writers, or really proportionally a lot of writers who are going into trying different things where they're combining different media perhaps into different forms, or making new forms of art out of their stories, all those different things. It's possible, but I wouldn't generally say that indigo is a good
oh, it's not just
to
indigo.
use for that,
No,
because
it's not just
yeah,
no. I agree, but
yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
just it's
their
not just
selection of science fiction is, well, to my view, kind of lame. They have they I don't want to be banned from chapters indigo or anything, but what I see in their section, as you say, first off, it's very small. Secondly, it is the classics and the spin-offs. Everything is, a Star Wars spin-off, a TV spin-off, a movie spin-off of one of these other things, and there's very little new original work that shows up on a chapter shelf. That may be different for fantasy, because I don't tend to look at the fantasy shelves, and I've got nothing against fantasy. It's not what I write, but I do like to read some of it. I find that science fiction is still thriving in indie publishing, but it's not getting to the big publishers. It's not getting to the shelves of the big bookstores like a Chapters Indigo kind of thing. I had this novel that I've brought out recently. I had a super well placed New York agent that shopped this around. They thought it was great, and they had represented the big names of the classic era, Heinlein and Niven and Cornell and Simak and all of these, and we're not able to find a publishing deal for it. It wasn't what the industry was looking for anymore, I guess, or there was something else that happened. But that would be my assumption, is that the publishing industry wasn't looking for that kind of thing. And I don't know what they were looking. I know they were looking for diverse voices, all good, and probably a few other things. But it's the publishing industry again, and they have very rigid kind of guidelines of what they're looking for, or what they're trying to anticipate the market is looking for. And I think that probably inhibits writers who think of themselves as writers, as opposed to video artists or game creators or any of those other things, from trying to be too experimental or whatever, in the sense of the form that they create.
I'm gonna push back just a touch, because okay, who's the biggest independent like books that sell? Romance. The publishing industry actually cannot keep up with the romance industry anymore.
It's huge. Yeah,
it's huge. It can't do it.
Yeah.
The publishing industry, as we know it today, is too slow on average for romance. I knew one author prior to her medical issues this year. She was releasing a book every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like the content was so voraciously in demand that she just killed it. Right. And she wouldn't go to anywhere near a traditional publisher because
couldn't bring it out fast enough.
Couldn't bring it out fast enough. And also she's making more money on her own. She's like, what do you have that I want?
Yeah.
And shrug, right? There was just a giant shrug, right?
Yeah.
So
I couldn't do that. I mean, I couldn't constantly create content in any kind
of. Listen. That is more the exception than the norm, right? For ladies and gentlemen, that is definitely more the exception than the norm. But okay, let's say hypothetically, it's probably possible for you. We'll just say, I'll say 2 books, maybe 3 a year. It's possible. I'm not saying every year, but you could crank it.
Yeah.
Right? You crank it. Now there comes a point where again, it's now about when you, again, because you're a science fiction author, right? Well, maybe it'd be like, you know what? There's a whole audience that's not being served. This is, again, strictly business that's not being served when I go to these bookstores, right? And I should be playing with all these really cool things like NFTs and barcodes and doing different things, because why not? Let's see if it works. Now, I'm not saying all this stuff works, but I'm just saying let's see if this works, because this is like, that's what I think of. Like science fiction should be, in my opinion, not just be talking about pertinent issues in the pages, but should also be the one going, hey, let's jump into these new frontiers and see what they look like, right? There should, and ironically, even in indie, it's the romance that does that first. Let's figure this shit out. I think there's a, but don't get me wrong. I think there's a huge, I think the sweet spot, I think, in science fiction is, I believe, the old style pulp dime novel kind of thing. I think there's a lot of potential with that in science fiction today, even if it's not in the bookstore. I think in regular thing, I could see it.
Well, you can see it in that, so many writers write that, and they write series. So it's like your TV series or your movie serials, the Saturday afternoon serial kind of format. You're bringing out the stories, and they continue and they continue and they continue. It's almost like a huge epic thing in bite-sized chunks. Certainly there's that, and there is a lot of that out there. And I think that in the indie publishing industry, that is what succeeds in science fiction when it comes to pure sales. It's not what I want to write. And I would not argue with you with talking about, science fiction maybe should be where people are experimenting with all these different possible forms. I'm not that guy, because I don't have that skill, but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I would say you're probably right. I have to leave it for another generation to do that, I guess, is what it comes down to. And look forward to seeing what they'll come up with.
No, it's fair. That's the thing. Like, that's just what I've noticed, right? It's just like, right, just what I've noticed. It's not just chapters, but I always ask the question, like, why is certain things not in the bookstore? Partly is, as you say, it's a business, right? What is the publisher looking for? But the other part of it is, okay, if it right, what can we do to stand out? I don't know. I think like this is how I think about this is, what can I try that hasn't been done? Because I think in a world like we're talking about in general, this giant bill. Okay, the fact that I have a podcast, okay, there are tens of thousands of these things out there, right? Now, I'm more stubborn than most, which works to my advantage. But and I have a big mouth, and that also works to my advantage. But how do I stand out from the pack? Well, I figured out like for me, my secret is be myself. Good, bad, or indifferent, be
Mhm.
myself. Right? It works. You either really like me, and you'll be like, yeah, I love this guy, or you hate me and watch me even more. Just that's it, right? And I'm good. And I'm good with that. But
Yeah,
it's
that
about
gets back to what we are talking about AI too. I mean,
yeah,
that can be the advantage that we humans have over AI. We'll have something in our, well, persona that comes across in things like this, but also the persona that comes across in our work that will be uniquely us, we hope. And we
well,
always try to make that way.
that's just this. Like I can only like no one can write a book like you. No one can write a book like me because you're the only Scott Overton that I'm aware of. There might be an army of you somewhere, but as far as I can tell, so yeah, that's another novel for another day. What are you
Yeah.
talking about, right? But there's only one of you. So what like, so it's okay, another example. I don't necessarily agree with the concept, although I do appreciate the business savvy of it. Was James Patterson? Say what you will, he broke his stuff down into a formula, and he sells the formula. He's the equivalent of McDonald's in writing. Like you sit there and think about it, right? Right. And from a business standpoint, you can't knock McDonald's. You can't. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you wanna go to McDonald's
But,
every day.
but
Yeah.
James Patterson wasn't the first to think of that, or
No,
getting
no.
all these other people to write James Patterson with so and so who does all the work. Because Alexandre Dumas, the Three Musketeers guy,
Mhm.
who wrote the Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo and all those, he had a factory of writers. He did exactly the same thing. He took all the credit, but what he did was he came up with the ideas and the main plot things, and then he would farm out a lot of the writing, and then he would polish it up afterward. So, he did that back in the day when the Three Musketeers was being written. It's
Eh,
not a new idea when it comes to making money. It just depends on what your goal is, right?
yeah, yeah, like I said, I don't wanna be McDonald's. I don't. Right? I don't necessarily need to be the 10-course meal place either. I figured it out. I wanna be that diner you go to get a really good meal, right? Occasionally, I put a deep thought in your head every once in a while. Most of the time, I'll probably just make you laugh, which is that, and I'm good with that, right? Right. And that's what I want to be. And you want to make people think about life, the universe, and everything. Pun completely intended, right?
Yeah, yeah, not on the humorous side. I mean, I wish I had Douglas Adams, ability to do that kind of thing. It's not me, but yeah, it's human things. I always come up with a theme, and this is something that, like I mentioned Robert J. Sawyer before. You kind of have the issue or the concept that you want to explore. You toss around the idea of a plot that's going to work with that. You have to come up with creative characters that are going to go with that theme. One of the ones he always mentions is Planet of the Apes in the original Charlton Heston movie, because his character, starts off the movie ranting and raving about how horrible the human race is and we all should be gone and it's terrible and blah, blah, blah. And of course, ends up on the future where the Planet of the Apes, he has to defend the human race against the apes. He's the one who has to give that case for the existence of the human race, whereas previously he hadn't been, fan of it. He had been knocking it down. So you create those characters that will best illustrate the theme or issue that you want to do, perhaps by finding somebody who is totally against the point that you're trying to make, or
Mhm.
it could be any permutation that way.
I right now, one of the novels I'm working on myself is about the idea of what makes a good person.
Hmm. Boy, that's
Because,
not a new topic at all.
well, it's a big topic, right? Well, it's a huge topic because it's not as simple as it sounds. It's like, I know what a good person is. Do you? Do you really?
Good
Right?
in what context? Good in what circumstances? Good to you, to me, to whom?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, so okay, so I one of my favorite like novels from back in the day are the old Parker novels, like the old crime novels.
The Robert Parker?
No, no, I had to look at. So I found them through, ironically, a comic book shop. Darwin Cook reimagined these crime novels by a
Okay.
character named Parker.
Oh,
Right. So you ever seen the movie Payback by Mel Gibson?
yes.
Yeah, that's the character based off those novels.
Uh,
Right now, he is not a good person, but he has a certain core integrity to him. And that's why I was thinking about this. So this is what actually got me thinking about it. It's like, you know, we respect as human beings, right? I don't know. We don't always respect nice people. We don't, but but we do respect people that stand for something. And
yeah.
I thought about that, and it's just like, you know what? There's something to that, and that's I thought would be the basis of where to start. Like, okay, why is Parker a bad person?
Well, it's kind of the concept of the anti-hero, right? I mean,
Yeah,
or the character who starts out as a jerk but seeks redemption and redeems himself along the way. It's a very real part of the human experience. We do that. We all probably, unless you're a real narcissist or whatever, feel like we've fallen short. We feel feelings of guilt toward others and maybe ourselves, and we are seeking a way to fix that or make up for it, compensate for it, redress the balance that was imbalanced, whatever it is. So you get the anti hero character who's not necessarily a nice guy, not a good guy, but that integrity drives them through to do something worthwhile, whatever you define that to be, but something that is good in the sense of at least the story.
mhm.
And yeah, it's something that we find very interesting because it's a great journey to take.
Well, yeah. Well, and I think that's again, and I'm talking about like character beats fascinating. We're talking about themes. Well, for me, it's like what I realize that it seems to be the thing that works today is we got to make the audience feel something,
Yeah.
but and then we can make them think. It's like that's the secret to the magic trick today, right?
Yeah. I mean, really, and I've said this to lots of people, character is key, and in one sense it's describing a character. This guy is so and so, blah blah blah, and their inner character is key. If you have someone who's driving the story and your audience doesn't care about them, doesn't care about whether they succeed or not, you've got no story. They're not going to follow along. They're not going to care how it turns out. It doesn't matter whether you have the most exciting action filled plot going. If they don't buy in to that character's story, why they're doing what they're doing, what they want, what they're trying so hard to get, if they don't identify in some sense with that character, even if they're a terrible character, but maybe the reader can identify with the goal that they're trying to achieve or whatever it is, they have to buy in or you've got no story. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and people have to connect to people.
Hmm.
That's just how we are. It's how we're wired,
Yeah, it
right?
is.
So
Yeah.
that all said, okay, I'm gonna ask probably two more questions, then we'll get to the plugging of stuff. As this is a holiday and you got family and dinner, and I
That's
want to
great. I can smell it
apologize.
from here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You want
You're
and
going on the
listen, I
table.
don't blame as wonderful as I am a human being, good food with good company trumps that. And I totally get that. If I had to pin you down, what's your favorite all-time sci-fi book?
Oh man, that is really, really tough. One of my all-time favorites, and it may be my favorite, strangely enough, is The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. Do you know that book?
Okay.
I mean, and that was just the power of the mind in that case. It was the first story, perhaps, that I encountered where telepathy got into it, where you could actually be mind to mind with another person and develop a relationship that way. And it just blew my mind in that sense. I just thought that was great. And I've still loved that book and gone back to it again and again. But I've also loved, Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. And you would think of those as old fashioned stories, but they're just so much in them that's still rich. The telepathy aspect of the chrysalids, I try to recreate in my newest book, where you've got brain augments that connect to the internet. And if you can connect to another person directly, if you could develop the nearest thing to telepathy that we are capable of achieving, unless you believe in real, psychic phenomena, perhaps. But we now do instant messaging, we do emailing, we do all these things, we do Skype and FaceTime and all this. Well, if it's right in your head and you're connecting one-on-one to the next person, what's the difference between that and telepathy? It's technological telepathy. So I guess I was always really attracted to that idea, and that's definitely right at the top of my list when it comes to books.
The communication or the connection?
It's the connection. It's the connection, because what would that be like? Good and bad. I mean, and I do explore that too. Privacy would become an issue, right? It'd be brutal, but not just the privacy that we are giving up now to big corporations for reward points or whatever it might be, but that privacy in intimacy. How far can intimacy really go? How much intimacy can any relationship stand? So there's all of that. That didn't get explored in the chrysalids, but that potential's probably always worked its way around and around in my mind.
Oh man, if telepathy was a thing, I'd be so screwed with the opposite sex, because I would be so screwed, because I'd be like I'd have it like yeah, because all of a sudden you just like I would, all my dirty thoughts would come out, and then everybody else's dirty thoughts would come out. It's like, wow, we all just want to get laid. Dang.
We're all disgusting. We're all perverts.
Yeah, exactly. So I would be like, oh geez, terrible, but that's okay. But I'm okay with being terrible that way. It's just it's part of who we are. It's just in our nature, right? So, but no, intimacy, privacy, connection, like how far, and okay. I was going to ask a question in between before I get to the last question. That's this: where you're in cottage country now. When you're not in cottage country, do you live in a big city or a small town?
I actually live out in the boonies near a medium-sized city, which is Sudbury, Ontario.
I know exactly where you're at.
But I don't live in the city, and there's lakes and lakes and lakes around Sudbury. So I live on a lake, and I'm not going to explain any further detail.
No. Hey, listen, you're. I don't need the exact specifics of where you live. I just need the general idea is all I'm really looking for.
Yeah.
But you're in a place where every night you get to look out into the stars.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. That is a very, very beautiful thing. And if I were to percolate just based on that, I could see why telepathy fascinates you so much. Right. I think I see why. And it's a cool thought. It's a really cool thought. So maybe, who knows? Right. I'm not going to be the first to put a computer in my head. Like for you, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be the first to do it. But that idea is as a concept, I can see the appeal of it for sure.
I've had other people ask me if I would step up and do this technology that I describe in augmentation, and I say, not the first. Just like you, I might, wait a while and see how it works for other people, because I'm not going to be the first one to jump on board that.
I've seen too much. Hey, the good of all. Whenever I hear the good of all speech from anybody, I tend to run the other direction as fast as I can, because usually that means good of all is almost always good for 2 or 3 people, and that's it. Everybody else, like, that's what I in my life experience, when I hear the good of others, it's like, "Oh, you mean the good for you." I'm out. And that just maybe I'm old and cautious and cynical and stuff. I don't know, but
I
here.
think it's a product of the times,
Yeah.
not just you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, like, again, no politics, but I mean, again, talking about the idea of integrity, yeah, we
Yeah.
don't live in that world right now, and, when that will eventually reset, but until it does, it would like, that is I think, the correct course of action, unfortunately. Okay, other question before we get to the plugging of stuff. So, you love science fiction, you love themes. Would you How would you describe so you do big theme science fiction. So you're like the stuff you grew up with. So today, do you go, like, do you honor it the same way the people you love reading it? Or what new bend do you bring to it? Do you think that what does Scott Overton bring to science fiction? I guess is ultimately what I'm gonna ask.
Hmm. Well, we all have a voice. We kind of try to create this voice as authors that is uniquely ours. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, I write it because it's what I have to write. So what do I bring to it is a really tough question. I like to explore the themes, like, for instance, my first science fiction novel takes us through the bloodstream. You talked about Isaac Asimov. He novelized Fantastic Voyage, the movie, back in the 60s. He wrote the novelization of that. And this is inspired by that. The issues it explores, though, is the sanctity of the human body. It's here, a nano submersible going through the bloodstream to try to save a victim's life. The victim is a VIP near the American president, near and dear to the president's heart. And the president has said they can't know what's happened to them. So the pilot of this submersible has a real problem with that issue. Where is the sanctity of the body? How can this person not be told that I'm traveling through her bloodstream trying to save her life? But that whole bit, sanctity of that issue. I have another one, a story called Naida, a novel where a guy gets an alien symbiotic being live in his body. They have to learn to communicate. So it's a lot of how much can a human being be changed and still be human and be considered human by other people, can feel human themselves. And so I think what I just bring to it is my own take on these issues and where I come to it and the things that I pull out of it. And how I define that, I'm not sure I can, but I think it would be different, from how you would write a story about a guy with a symbiotic alien in him, or a guy traveling through a bloodstream, controlling a nano device by virtual reality. Or I have another one that involves multiple personalities from someone else that have taken over a body. Um, you know, it's what I bring to it and how I explore that theme that I guess is individually me.
All right. Mr. Scott, I think we have an interview here. What do you think?
I think it works for me.
Okay. So we got to do an official plug.
Sure.
So why don't you tell people who you are and where people can find you?
Well, as we've been discussing, I'm a science fiction writer, former radio broadcaster. The place that I would first steer everybody to is my website, which is www.scottoverton.ca. You got my name on the screen, you can't go wrong. And that has links to everything else. I am, on Facebook as scottoverton.author. I do have a Goodreads presence. I do have a Twitter presence. Don't do as much of that anymore. And then, of course, there are the links to the books. But on my website, you'll find the links to look at the book trailers, to read sample chapters. I've got 4 novels out right now that are science fiction. I mentioned my first novel, Dead Air, which is not, I'd call it a mystery thriller about the radio world. And the rest are science fiction. The Primus Labyrinth is the one that I was talking about, traveling through a human bloodstream with the victim's bloodstream seeded with biochemical bombs that would create fatal blood clots. Then this novel Naida, where Naida is the name that the human being gives to the symbiotic alien that's come to live in his body, which gives him some abilities. It's almost a superhero origin story, but played very straight. There's another one called The Dispossession of Dylan Knox, in which a guy's body has been essentially taken over, his psyche replaced by multiple personalities. I won't get too far into where they come from, but a lot of that involves a romantic element because there's a strong female protagonist who encounters this guy who was her high school sweetheart. He ain't what he used to be or who he used to be. And there's a geopolitical thriller in that. And Augment Nation, my newest one about brain augments. And the main character is uniquely placed to fight back and lead resistance against the bad stuff that comes from having direct brain internet connections and all of the potential for harm, evil, nefarious things. He's not a hero, but nobody can do it and is well placed and skilled to be able to do it as he can.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for today. Tomorrow, Rich Davis comes back for some more. That's going to be officially episode 901. Episode 900 is going to be on Boxing Day, where I'm drawing Ninja Turtles with a bunch of people. That's how I'm doing my 900th episode there, Scott. So, to everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.